Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to your cybersecurity series. My name is Vlad, and together we get into cybersecurity progressively to understand more about this exciting domain. Today, I have a very special video for you, which is about the different jobs and careers and expertise that you can develop within cybersecurity. This is really meant to answer questions from students, from family members who are eager to know more about cybersecurity, but sometimes are only perceiving cyber as what we see in the media, meaning the penetration testing, the bug bounty, so kind of the hacker type of job or hacker type of expertise, which can be deceitful in the sense that it gives the impression that you need absolutely technical skills to perform and work in cybersecurity. And we will see that just in a second. It's completely wrong. That's not mandatory, at least not for all of the fields, not all of the jobs that you can have within cyber. As I said in my channel introduction video, cybersecurity is often perceived as a very niche, very narrow domain, which would be part of a wider IT, for example. But that's really not the case. There are many experiences that you can have within cyber, and you can really move from one experience to another. It's not because you become an expert in a certain area that you have to do your entire career. There are many ways to move around, and as we'll see just in a minute. To support that, there are many frameworks, many documents that are describing the different jobs or careers that you can have in cybersecurity. My preference goes to this mapping, and I will zoom in just a minute. This mapping I like because it really shows the different main areas within cybersecurity and kind of their interconnections with one another. So without further ado, let's zoom in, and I will try every time to pinpoint exactly where do you need some specific technical skills in order to succeed, or what is already accessible with just a traditional master's degree or just a degree as soon as you have, let's say, engaged a bit in the foundations and if you have this professional curiosity. So I will start right in the middle. So cybersecurity domains, of course, it relies on the foundations that we have discussed in the previous videos. So understanding that cybersecurity, it's all about the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the services or the systems. The first domain that we have right on top of it in yellow here, it's about defining the industry standards. So basically defining the best practices for everyone to follow. And there are many frameworks today that are published. Here you have a few names. We talk about ISO 27001. There is the NIST cybersecurity framework. There is the CIS top 20, the MITRE which is more specifically addressing and describing the different steps that a hacker goes through when conducting an attack. But basically, these are frameworks that are formalized and given to the entire community to work upon. So that's really about setting industry best practices, but then you need to apply those standards and frameworks to your own company. And it starts with what you have in green at the bottom right, what we call the governance. So the governance is about establishing how cybersecurity should work within a company. So it's about defining the processes, defining the expectations, and defining basically how cyber works together with the business. As an input, of course, you would use what we discussed in yellow. So you would use those frameworks, but you would also take into account the different laws and regulations as applicable based on your company footprint. If you have offices in different countries and regions or continents, of course, that will depend and you will have a different footprint. Within legal, so laws and regulation, of course, if you have a legal background as a legal or juridic student, that would be extremely helpful because I'm sure you will have a better understanding of the legal context and how it all fits together. So the first distinction that we can make is between industry standards, which are specific to one industry. For example, here on the slide we have PCI, which is payment card industry. So there are some specific requirements when you manipulate payment card data, for example. You have HIPAA, which is applicable in the US, which is about the health insurance accountability framework. Again, if you manipulate certain medical data from patients, there are also additional cybersecurity measures that needs to be enforced. But we could quote a few more. I mean, there is the EASA Part IS, which is, for example, applicable in the aerospace industry, especially for companies and manufacturers of aircraft. There is the TISAX, which is applicable in the automobile. So there are many frameworks like that. And then there are the laws. So they have been established as laws by different governments or central entities. That's the case, for example, here of GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. It's applicable in the European Union. And it's very famous because it was used as a first sample in many jurisdictions, and they have I mean, some of them have developed their own local um, derivatives in terms of how to protect the private data from the users and the customers. So you take all of that as an input, and then of course you need to inform your management, explain to them how you need to organize cybersecurity in order to comply with, as I said, best practices, legal and legal regulations. In order to prove that you are compliant, of course, the company has to produce a certain number of documents, and that's what we call companies' policies, so security policies or cyber security policies. And those policies are then derived in more practical documents. So we talk usually about procedures, standards, guidelines, etc. So all of that is kind of about organizing cyber within a company. If I go up a bit, so in the pink area, enterprise risk management, basically it's about making sure that we understand what are the risks. So this is a key notion in cyber, and we will discuss that in the next videos and episodes. Basically, everything in cybersecurity is about reducing the risks, or at least reducing it until we reach a manageable level. Because we need to establish and understand how exposed we are to cyber attacks and what would be the consequences in terms of damage to the company, damage to the assets or to the people, what would be the consequences for a company. And so this field of expertise is really to understand that, identify mitigation measures, define a risk treatment strategy, and of course inform the different businesses. This rely on what we have just above, so the risk assessment. So that's the part in light red. Those risk assessment can be theoretical, and for that you don't really need technical skills. However, if you want to push it even further and test the theory to see, okay, perhaps I have defined in my head a scenario about an attacker using a certain technique and managing to breach into my application. If I want to put this scenario into practice and really test whether or not it's feasible, then I can conduct what we call penetration test. And this is the way that good hackers try to um, penetrate and breach our internal defenses to assess whether or not this is a realistic scenario. And there, of course, you would require a certain number of techniques and tools. We will talk about social engineering, for example, but there are a lot of suites and articles that you will find on internet to give you at least a starting point and give you some pointers to more develop some hacking skills. All of that, so enterprise risk management and risk assessment, it's only good if you know who you are fighting against, which is why at the very bottom here in purple, we have another area of expertise, which is threat intelligence. And it's all about knowing your adversary. So who are the hackers? What tools do they use? What are their processes and techniques? And centralizing information, sharing information also with peers to understand what you are exposed to. So this is also a field of expertise where you do not require technical skills, but it's really interesting to know more about your adversaries in general. In blue, we have two branches. So the career development, which is about helping cyber professionals obtain certifications, obtain new skills, and develop their career, and also the training. So user education can be also perceived as not only training for people who are already within cyber, but rather raising the collective awareness of the general population. And for that, again, unless you want to give practical demonstrations or showing technical hacking skills, you can you can stay, let's say, accessible or build an accessible presentation without having an extensive technical expertise. Even, for example, having a psychology or having some experience or some having done some studies in psychology in general can be really useful to understand how to make awareness content more attractive, how to convey cybersecurity message to your audience more effectively. Having said that, so okay, there is the training part, there is the risk assessment part, and then at some point we need to, as I said, implement mitigation measures. And this is the field that you have at the bottom left, the security operations. So it's really about setting the defenses, setting the different protections to be able to protect the business, detect potential threats and potential incidents, and if we detect something, react accordingly. So you have the field of incident response. Here, obviously, it's heavily relying on technical skills, and part of it is about the investigations, which I used to do when I was in Luxembourg. So you need to understand and sometimes acquire data from compromised systems for so analyzing laptops, mobile phones, etc., to understand what happened and how to make sure the attacker can no longer infect other systems and recover your operations as soon as possible. In red, we have a very tiny field. I mean, tiny here on the chart, but it's really again an extensive domain, which is about the security of the connected components. For example, the IoT, which is the Internet of Things. We can talk about sensors, any devices that you would find in a smart home. For example, connected fridges, connected devices, connected doorbells, for example. All of that of course, needs to be secure accordingly. So that's also an area of research. At the top left, we have the security architecture. So you need to understand that the applications that we develop today, they are not as a standalone. They are widely interconnected. Some of them are still on-premise, meaning on the servers of the company. Some of them are in the cloud. But in both scenarios, there are a lot of interconnections. And those interconnections and dependencies, they need to be structured accordingly, which is the field of security architecture in general. So here you would find some key notions like access control, identity management, authentication. These are essential notions that we will develop later in the curriculum. Of course, we'll talk also about cryptography, which is again essential in maintaining and identifying correctly the identities of the people. And in orange here, you have the application security. So it's not only about securing the different blocks and onboarding additional security measures. Sometimes it's also about making sure that cybersecurity is embedded within the development. So here in orange, it's really about helping the developers, so the guys who are typing codes in Java, in Python, whatever language, making sure that they follow the best practices of, for example, sanitizing the inputs, using safe functions, etc., etc. I think I forgot at the top also, of course, the patch management. So once you have a big application with different blocks running on different servers, you need to make sure that you apply regularly the updates, the patches, etc., etc., to maintain a safe configuration of your entire company and the assets overall. So this is what really to give you an overview of cybersecurity. There are many boxes and we could spend a lot more time describing each of them, but that's more or less the purpose of the upcoming videos. What we will try to do is give you some perspective on each, I mean, not each, but at least the main colors, the main areas. And again, as I said in the beginning, it's not because you specialize in a certain area that you are doomed to do your career in this field. You can really move around. I have personally worked in investigations and forensics. Today, I work mostly in governance and risk assessments. I'm actively using the frameworks in yellow that you see in the middle. This video and the trainings that I've given to engineering students can also be considered user education. So you can really move around and play with the different expertise, enrich your own profile and experience. That's all for today. In the coming videos, as I said, we will explore different notions. I think we will start with with the threat intelligence to give you more context about the different adversaries and who can be attacking a business in general. But that's again for the other video. Don't hesitate to give me some feedback. It's always appreciated. That's it for today. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.